Black women saying, well, look what they do, and look how they are, and look what they do, and we unwittingly participate in the emasculation, the dehumanization, the devaluation, and the disheartening of Black men because they didn't do it the way we wanted them to do it.
Reverend Dr. Iyanla Vanzant has spent almost 40 years of her career speaking to Black men and women about relationships, therapy, and personal development. She is seen as one of the matriarchs within the Black community and is known for her direct approach when it comes to giving advice on how to navigate this life. Welcome and welcome back, family. I'm your host, Thatbaldbrutha. And today we're going to be going over to Counsel Culture, hosted by Nick Cannon, where Dr. Vanzant sat down with him to discuss many of the issues that Black men are facing in today's society, including our resistance towards therapy. Let's get into it.
I think Black men are now standing up a little more when it comes to mental health and personal care than the brown men, Latin men, or the red men who are just really silent.
Right.
But I do encourage, support, applaud you, because if nothing else, having another person to talk to dump your brain out with, keeps you accountable to yourself,
right,
and to others. Because a man who is not accountable to himself, he's a danger to himself and everybody else.
Right.
And when you're alone in your head without adult supervision, making up stuff, and you don't have anybody to bounce that off of,
right,
where's your accountability?
Right.
You could, when you up there, you really think you got it going on, don't you?
So right here, she talks about the importance of having accountability for self. More often than we care to admit, gentlemen, we walk around here thinking that we got all our stuff together. We think we can handle anything that comes our way. We don't worry about the stress and strain that comes inherently with being a Black man in today's society. We often take for granted the importance of speaking on these issues, getting our feelings out and having them addressed so that we're not carrying that inside. Listen, I was where many of you are right now. I was struggling with life, trying to figure things out, getting frustrated with the way things were panning out and how I wasn't getting any results after all the effort and work I was putting in. I was bottling up anger and frustration from all that, all the emotions and experiences that I had, the heartbreak that I dealt with through bad relationship after bad relationship, and walking around carrying that on my shoulder, thinking that I could somehow magically make it go away if I just kept ignoring it and suppressing it enough that it wasn't going to become an issue later on down the road. I wasn't trying to get any help. I didn't think it was manly to be asking for help or seeking any kind of medical professional therapy or any kind of intervention. Then one day I realized just how dangerous that mindset and way of thinking was going to be for me. I found myself right in the middle of depression, a broken man trying to figure out how to make things work. And it wasn't until I got to that bottom barrel level that I finally reached out and said, you know what? I got to do this for me. I got to stop letting my ego get in the way of my own mental health. And I reached out and found a therapist and began that process. And now I am a much better individual. I understand the importance of having a self-accountability as well as self-awareness. I'm an advocate for therapy. I try to educate Black men to understand that it's important that you find and seek help when you can get it. But I know people want to throw their hands up and say, oh, I can't afford this. Well, you got to prioritize yourself, gentlemen. You got to decide, okay, is it going to be the shoes or is it going to be me? There's no shame in recognizing and reaching out for help. I don't care what everybody else says to you online, all the crap you hear. Don't believe it. Take the time to get yourself right. Then you can focus more on achieving your goals and defining your purpose.
I think one of the greatest crimes, there are many, but one of the greatest crimes perpetuated against Black men specifically is the level to which their humanity and their hearts have been devalued, diminished, and dehumanized, and that they have become doing machines. The greatest value a Black man has, in many instances, is what he can do for somebody. Right. And how he can do it and how much he can do it and how much he earns doing it. I mean, I hear it and see it among young people in the relationships, oh, you're going to get my nails done and you're going to do this and you're going to do that.
Right.
They've been demeaned and devalued and dehearted
Right.
to the point where they value themselves based on what they can do. Fix it, get it, make it happen. And no place have I seen in our world does anybody tell Black men how to be. How to be with themselves, how to be true to themselves, how to be with their feelings, how to be with their heart, and it's criminal. So what happens is then they begin to do the things that are expected of them. And then if they can't do that anymore, whether it's the job or pay the mortgage or whatever, then they're just cast off like socks in the corner.
Right.
Masculinity in general has been under attack for a number of years. And it feels like to me, when it comes to Black men, it seems to be an increase in the amount of hate that we get both online and off. It's interesting how she pointed out that Black men have been devalued, deheartened, and demeaned. And to her point, it definitely feels like Black men in particular are being dehumanized in our community. I think people underestimate the importance that men need to feel valued. And all you see when you look online are conversations about, like she said, what can you give? What are you buying me? What are you doing for me? No question about how you're feeling. No question about what's going on with you. Trying to understand us as human beings. It's more about seeing us as just robots whose job is just to produce and give and do nothing and have no care or concern for our own well-being.
One of the greatest kryptonites for man, a man in general, Black men specifically, is the feeling, the belief, the treatment that he is somehow inadequate. And when you devalue a man, he's going to feel inadequate. When you dehumanize him, when you deheart him, so then where does he go with that?
Right.
He's inadequate and he doesn't serve a purpose because he can't do what you need him to do to make you feel better about yourself.
What's the purpose? What's the point?
What's the point? And that's why we have these incredible rises in suicide. Yeah. I personally think it's why we have this, and I don't know the figures, I don't know what they are now, but the increase between, I think it was 2017 and 2021, a 30-something% increase in the number of Black men with prostate cancer, starting early. And why? Because their manhood is under attack.
Right.
And, their psyche is not nourishing and nurturing them, and their masculinity. Because where in the world do we see them lifted, honored? And here's what I hear in the back of my mind. So let me just go ahead and deal with it. Black women saying, well, look what they do, and look how they are, and look what they do, and we unwittingly participate in the emasculation, the dehumanization, the devaluation, and the disheartening of Black men because they didn't do it the way we wanted them to do it.
I like what she said when she mentioned that men feeling inadequate is like kryptonite to them, because as men, who we are and what we can do in this society is really all we have. We have grown to accept and understand that our personal feelings don't matter. Who we are necessarily doesn't always matter. It's about what we do. And unfortunately, that frustration manifests itself in ways that only further the negative narrative that's being pushed out about Black men. Look at what they do. Look at how they talk to us and talk about us and how they treat us. The important thing to remember, fellas, is that we can control the narrative. We don't have to feed into these arguments that we're hearing from some of the women's spaces. We can set the tone for the kind of conversations we want to have that are solution-focused conversations where both sides get to listen and hear each other out, listening to understand, right? We want to understand where women are coming from, and we want them to understand where we're coming from. And then we can start discussing solutions to get the ship on the right course.
The lines are becoming more and more blurred.
They are.
And in terms of interracial, intercultural partnerships, relationships, marriages. It's a sign of the times. You, as a black man, dating a woman of another race or culture, are demonstrating that you can love who you love and still take care of your people. Why isn't that a consideration? Maybe that's not your sole contract to marry a black woman, but to take care of the black community and to do it in a way where you are out in the world and people see you and you handle yourself and you speak your truth and you state your intention and you love Becky.
You know, as humans, we have a tendency of seeing things as either black or white, and we completely ignore the heavy amounts of gray that surround us in our day-to-day experiences. We live in a day and age where who you love and how you love is on such a broad spectrum, it's almost unfair to cast judgment, but we still do. I know there's been a lot of conversation lately about being pro-black for the community, but dating outside your race. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about whether or not you think it's possible to separate church from state, still be focused on the black community and contribute, versus you're not able to do so because you happen to be sleeping with someone who's not part of the black community.
You know what? Humans are crazy as hell. Do you know that? We are crazy as hell, just like me. I never know what's going to set me off.
Right.
So we have to, and I want to encourage us, invite us in this day and age to stop, to really reconsider the kind of chains that we place on each other. We don't call it enslavement. Your opinion of me is a chain around my neck. Where's the free will? Where's the choice?
Right. Judgment.
There are a lot of men of color out there with means who ain't doing nothing. Who spend their money on the pole.
Right.
Okay, and they sleep with black women.
Right.
And ain't doing nothing for the hundreds of thousands of young black boys that can't read. Or the children, the hundreds of thousands of black children with food insecurity right here in America. And they sleeping with everything black and that they want to and ain't doing nothing. So let's have a big conversation.
Yeah.
I also like how she compared opinions to chains around our neck. In this modern day technology with social media and everything and the importance that people place on it, it almost feels like we are a slave to the algorithm. And understanding the effects of social media on the human psyche is very important. Our young people are being severely impacted by social media and the external validation that they are constantly seeking. They're out here doing all kinds of crazy things, putting their lives at risk, saying off the wall things just with the intention of just being controversial, only for the clicks, only to get that attention so they can feel like they matter. As the adults in the community, we have to make sure we are giving attention to our kids and showing them that what you see online is not always reality. Because a lot of times the same parents that are chastising the kids that are online doing these crazy things are themselves out here doing just as crazy and controversial things too. Having the kids out here seeking validation from people who they're never going to really meet, never going to have really any real impact on their lives, but they believe wholeheartedly that if they're not liked, they don't get enough likes on this post, or they don't post frequently enough, or they look a certain kind of way on camera, that somehow they have no value. It's up to us as their parents to ensure that we are instilling in them that value doesn't come from a 6-7 inch screen. Make sure you love yourself first. It has to come from the community. It has to come from within the family. They have to understand who they are as young men and young women coming up in this crazy world, because society is not going to be as forgiving as we are as parents.
The first term I want to bring up is a deadbeat dad. I hear that a lot. I hear that term thrown around.
About you.
About me and many others of just men that, may not be in your traditional relationship. And then the other term that I hear quite a bit is a broken home. creating broken homes. I struggle with those things because obviously I don't want to be associated or a part of either one of those. But in asking you, if these terms do apply, I mean, I want to take accountability for them, but I want to know what we feel the definition of those are, and then not only just for myself, for someone who may not be in your traditional or conventional relationship, how can we be the best fathers to our multiple children, or how do we mend the broken households that we may have created?
I come out of a non-traditional household. My mother was the other woman. My father lived around the corner with his wife. My mother lived in my grandmother's house, my father's mother's house.
Wow.
Okay, so I come, and what was most devastating for me in all of that, I mean, this story has lots of twists and turns, was that nobody told me the truth. I think for me, and everybody has to define this, for me, a deadbeat dad is one who doesn't honor the provision or doesn't provide provision for his seed. But my father didn't know if I had shoes or food or whatever. For me, he was a deadbeat dad. I knew who he was. I knew where he was. He didn't provide for his seed. That is the first thing that I believe a father has to do. Number two, I think that a father has to be a demonstration of what I call AIM: accountability, integrity, and mastery. Those three things.
Yeah.
My father wasn't any of those.
There was a recent conversation on TikTok where a father and his daughter were going back and forth because she felt a way about him not being in her life, and he was trying to explain to her the unknowns that she wasn't aware of that are involved when it comes to that situation when you're in a divorce and going through a separation, and how all that played out. And I felt it very important to stress that divorce is complicated. There are a lot of moving parts, and it's unfortunate that kids don't fully grasp that in the moments when it often happens. And you only have what you perceive from your perspective. Now, this is not to discount what they perceive and how you feel based on what you understand. Your feelings are definitely validated. But what I'm trying to impress upon you is that understanding the gravity of a divorce and all the inner workings involved is not something you need to understand at that young age, right? When you get old enough to have that kind of conversation, reach out to your parents and ask, I want to understand what happened between you and mom, or mom and dad, whatever the case.
That women look to men to what they can do. What can you do? So it's not that that's where you've been reduced to. That's what's expected of you.
Right.
Because there are many men, I've worked with a lot of them, who want to be a father to their child, but because they can't write a check, they're not allowed to. Let's have that conversation, okay? There are many men who want to be in their children's lives, but because the woman is so and this isn't, not a condemnation of my sister women, but because she's so bitter and disappointed and angry, upset because she didn't make it with the man, that she will deny the child its father. I've seen it. This is not something somebody's telling me, nor is it a judgment or a condemnation. So it's a very complicated matter. I don't think a father is deadbeat if he's not allowed to be in relationship with his children. But if he has the capacity, if he has the ability, and he has the responsibility, and he doesn't, too many of our young girls are, ravishing themselves with drugs and sex and all kinds because daddy never tucked them in at night. Too many young men are using a gun, and their penis as weapons because daddy didn't give them another model to be. So for me, a deadbeat dad is a man who doesn't provide for his seed when he has the responsibility to do. A man who doesn't walk in his truth. Who doesn't walk in his truth, whatever that is. I don't care if he's a bus driver, a grave digger. Let your children know who you are. through your presence, not through your pocket.
And she also talked about what's called parental alienation, or when a parent is not allowed to be in the child's life because of somebody in the relationship having residual feelings or ill will towards the non-custodial parent, and allowing those feelings to be projected onto the child and govern that child's response towards the parent. You know, as someone who's been through divorce, part of the reason that I have my platform is because I want my children to see that even though their father did not make all the best decisions, make all the best moves, was not the best person he could have been at the time, that once you know better, in spite of all those things, you can do better. I try to be that living example so they can understand that when they get to be adults and they look back on their life and realize that they've made some twists and turns, zigs and zags that they could have avoided, and that the world doesn't have to end for them because they made some mistakes. You can recover, you can bounce back and move forward. Now, this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate how Dr. Vanzant took the time to peel back the layers to really start to expose some of the ills that we Black men are experiencing, and giving some insight into our needs and what's important as men so that we can better ourselves. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are about what Dr. Vanzant said. And this conversation reminds me of our last video where we heard Ebony K. Williams and Melissa Ford share their thoughts and opinions about dating in modern society and how Black men are perceiving them. And for that conversation, click the link over here and I'll see you there.